What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to have a very special guest. But before we get into that, if you are new to the podcast, we have rants where I kind of go and vent and discuss hot topics in the industry, or maybe even call out some of the snake oil salesmen. And then obviously full-length interviews, which we'll have today, and then mental minutes to help elevate your performance with those quick mental game hacks and then deep dive educational explorations into small intricacies of skill acquisition or being in the zone, anything to help improve your performance. But if you have any other questions, topics, or guest suggestions, please reach out to us at inthezonepodcast123@gmail.com. But like I said, our guest today is Brian Gatta. He's a awesome entrepreneur and coach all throughout the baseball world, has a lot of great resources, and I really recommend you guys checking those out in the show notes here. There's several of them, but Brian, welcome on.
Thank you, Garrison. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously we were kind of chatting a little bit before the recording here, and you said you had actually three boys and one girl, and most of them all sound like they all played professionally at some level. So, hey, you got some pretty good genetics coming from you.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should credit that to my wife.
Okay. Did she play sports at all that kind of
No,
helped that genetic pool?
she she didn't. I'm just trying to be, I guess, trying to be humble, but she, she definitely contributes some genetics to the mix because one of my boys is I'm 5'10". One of my boys is 6'3",
Oh,
so
wow.
I think he got that from her side of the family.
I love that. That's funny. It seems like a lot of the kids are getting the mother side of the gene pool these days where they're starting to kind of spike up. Sometimes guys get the short end of the stick, literally, you know. Like myself, I'm also
Yeah.
5'10". But yeah, no, it's definitely something that I don't think you should take lightly, being humble about it, but raising kids to be able to have the dedication and be able to stay, in the zone with whatever they're doing, I think is really important. And it actually says a lot about you and your wife's parenting skills, in my opinion. I think that's great.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it was a labor of love for me. I happened to, at the time when my kids were young, I had a lot of flexibility and freedom with work, and so I would come home pretty early in the afternoon when they were off school and just throw just throw numerous pitches to my boys out on the street.
Oh, I'm sure.
And
Yeah.
every weekend, we never missed a weekend going up to the school and taking batting practice and infield, and same thing with my daughter, going up to the field and kicking the soccer ball around. So I wasn't one of those dads who golfed or went out to the bars with my buddies or anything like that. I mean, I had little kids and I wanted to spend time with them, and so that's what I did. We played sports.
I love it. That's beautiful. And there's definitely a lot to be said to that when you spend time with them. Like that's stuff that even myself, I look back on time with me and my dad in the backyard where he was throwing BP or, playing catch with me, or we were doing I guess back in the early 2000s, like the web gyms, like the diving catches, right? Like he'd always
Yep.
have me go out there
Yep.
and throw it a little bit further out of my reach. So I just dive and kind of practice doing that. And it was, those memories that you always cherish and look back on for sure. Um,
Yep.
but I guess kind of transitioning into this, since you do coach, and I'm sure you've probably coached some of your, uh, kids in the past through as they were going through the rankings. How did you maintain, I guess, and this is kind of more of a tangent that I've referenced in a previous podcast. It's like a coach to parent to player relationship, right? Like if you're not the coach, obviously there's three different people there, but how did you know when to switch hats from being a coach to being a parent for your sons or your daughter?
Yeah. That was that's a great question, and I'm trying to think of how. I mean, there really wasn't a whole lot of difference truthfully. I mean, I kind of felt like as a father, I was their coach, not just coaching them in the particular sport that we were involved in at the time, but, coaching them through life and coaching them just in terms of their behavior and their daily activities, their schoolwork,
Hmm.
things like that. So, I mean, I don't really feel like there was a major difference in terms of how we communicated in our relationship. Now, I was probably a little bit more on the stern side, especially with my older boy in coaching. And looking back, it's kind of funny because I had three boys spaced 2 years apart, and then our daughter was our fourth. But with my first son, I mean, I was pretty intense, and I was a pretty aggressive youth coach. One that you look at now and you might say, hey, pull it in a little bit. And by my third one, I kind of got a little different perspective, and I remember just sort of watching him out in the field in the machine pitch or coach pitch, and just kind of thinking, this is my last go round here, and it was more like a Norman Rockwell, just enjoying the moment type of thing. So I don't know which is better. I don't know, if I was doing the kids a disservice by being a little bit more mellow by the third one, or maybe I was, maybe that's the way it should be. But in terms of coach and parent relationship, I didn't really feel like there was a whole lot of difference. I didn't have a switch that I turned on when we got to the field and said, okay, now I'm a coach.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And I think everyone can speak for themselves in their own experience here, but it seems like sometimes the parents are a lot harder on their own kids than the other kids around them. And some of them are maybe vocalize and say, hey, I treat everyone the same. But I think if you're operating out of love and out of, helping guys get better and not just, having this kind of more dictatorship or like punishment type of approach to coaching, then it's really easy to kind of keep that same consistency like you said you had, where you're not being too stern. Maybe that I'm not sure. You could kind of speak more light into this. Maybe you kind of leaned a little bit more towards that type of approach to start out as a coach, or a little bit more stern, as you could say. But maybe like as you went further down, how I've seen myself kind of changes, turning into a little bit more of a collaborative approach to where I'm involving the player a little bit more on some of the decisions. Once they mature, obviously, like for younger kids, it's a little bit different because you're instilling more of just general foundational principles and fundamentals of the game, right? But um, it's just something that I think a lot of parents probably do honestly need a little bit of guidance on sometimes, especially if it's their first kid that's playing sports and they're really unfamiliar with what they got going on. Um, but do you have any resources? I know you've had the website supportiveparent.com. Is that something that any of the parents can reach out and maybe talk to you a little bit about from your experiences in the past?
But without question, that's how that business was born. Is from my perspective of not only being a coach, but also as my kids got older, being a sports parent. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, the three boys all played in college. Two of them still play professionally. My daughter played in college and professionally, and so I've seen really every aspect of sports parenting, from berating officials to trying to influence coaches at a high school level or even a college level. I've seen all that, and so it's nothing makes parents crazier than their kids' sports, right? And so the mission of Supportive Parent is to change the kind of toxic culture in youth sports that's
Mm.
caused by over parents. And my my main one of the best quotes that I ever read, and it was in a little league handbook back from the 1950s.
Oh,
But
wow.
somebody wrote, "Prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child." And it's extremely profound because too many parents now are trying to clear the path. And so they want their child just to have an easy route into playing time and making the team. And, that's not what sports is about. Sports is about learning how to deal with adversity, learning how to make your own way, learning how to succeed on your own merits, not having mom and dad come in and swoop in and clear the path for you. So that's really what supportive parent is about, is teaching parents that, your role is not to email the coach and demand playing time for
Oh,
for your child,
yeah.
or not to email the athletic director and try to get the coach fired. Your role is to sit back and support your child at home and on the field, and let them make their own way. And that's how they're going to accomplish, in life. You're not going to, when they get out of school, whenever that is, and they get their first job, you're not going to start emailing their manager and telling him he needs a promotion. So
Yeah.
sometime the kid is going to figure it out on their own. And now sports is the best way to learn that.
Oh, I 100% agree with all you said there. That's beautiful and well said from that quote there. It's kind of funny how that came in from the 1950s and now, slowly everyone in the baseball industry, you hear about it all the time. It's like, oh, there's daddy ball or, on the coach's side, it sounds kind of funny, but we have the term for some coaches that I speak with is helicopter parents, right? Where they're having to kind of hover over and basically, they're making the path, like you mentioned before, for them and trying to do everything for them. And there's a difference between, I'm all for parents like sitting in on lessons or a bullpen to try to figure out what's going on to help them. But to the point where like they're jumping in and like teaching the kid in the middle. And I'm like, hey, are you paying me to coach this kid? Or are you wanting to coach this kid? Because I can leave if you want to, like it's to the point where it gets a little uh overwhelming for the kid, right? And I even had a previous episode where I was talking about vomit cueing where you hear parents yelling like things from the stands or things like that. And like at the end of the day, sometimes those kids aren't really going to be able to do that in a high pressure situation such as a game or even in practice sometimes, right? Like you don't have much time to think when you have the bat in your hand when you're trying to hit a round ball or, whenever you're trying to do something like pitching, you're trying to get the guy out. Last thing you want to think about is your mechanics. Otherwise, you're getting out of your mental flow state or your zone, right? And then everything kind of domino effects from there, right? But what did you
Well, no,
kind of see? Oh, go ahead.
I was saying, no question about it. I mean, you have parents who, um, we used to laugh all the time because we could tell which kids um, were kids who were taking private lessons because their moms would yell technical things while they're up to bat, keep your elbow up or something like that. And this is a mom who's never swung a bat in her life. So she's obviously heard that. She's parroting it. And so here's a kid who's at the plate, about to face a 75-mile-an-hour fastball coming at him. And now he's got not only his coach at third base saying, patience and power, but his mom saying, keep your elbow up. And then, the kids are out in the field chattering to him. I mean, it's crazy. Just let the kid get up there and concentrate and hit. But a lot of parents don't understand that.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a lot of science to it too, where it's like guys are more apt to choke or not perform very well whenever they're thinking too intrinsically, right? They're thinking about where their elbow is, where, maybe their knee or name any other body part, right? Versus just, see the ball, hit the ball, or hey, see the target, I'm
Right.
throwing it there, right? It's takes a lot of the thought process out of it. And there might be some times, a place and time to do that for practice. But even then, I think, you want to make it really is as thoughtless as possible. And I'm sure you've probably seen this before too, where guys who are really good are usually not the most, technical or I guess you could say cerebral is a good term for it. Very having a lot of head knowledge up there while they're playing. They're usually almost kind of, in lack of better terms, airheads. They're just a little just dumb enough to where they're like, okay, hey, I'm in this situation, I'm just gonna hit the ball. Right? Like And again, that kind of goes a little bit further down the line, and a lot of other guys can get more technical, in certain settings, but sometimes you just gotta let all that go and play the game and let it ride, right?
Well, my third son is a perfect example of this. I'm a a good youth coach, but because I didn't play at a high level, I don't have the tremendous technical skill. You wouldn't call me a great batting coach. I don't have
Mm.
the technical skill. And I can remember my third coach when he was my third son, when he was 9 years old, playing travel ball, and he had just an unbelievable year. I mean, just like better than my first two I'd ever had. And I'm thinking, geez, this kid, he's special. And then his 10-year-old year, our travel team got a new coach. We rotated coaches every year. And this new coach was a tremendous hitting coach. And I remember walking up to a practice while he was coaching my son, giving him one-on-one, and just being so thankful that he was getting this high level training. And I just was really, really thinking this was going to do him a world of good. And the 10-year-old year, he couldn't hit. I mean, he
Mm.
just suddenly could not hit. And I'm not sure that it's because of this, but my only theory is he just had so much in his head now
Yeah.
that when he was getting to the plate, he was trying to go through all those gears and all those wheels that he's been taught versus what he was doing at 9 when he was coached by me, which was just here's the bat, go up there and swing it.
Hmm.
And I think that there really is something to that.
Yeah, 100%. I think, we're all guilty of it and getting like maybe a little too robotic. You want things to have a more fluid, athletic type of feel. And even for you being a coach, and not saying that, you not playing at a high level, you can still have that keen coach's eye being around the game a lot. You can tell when guys are very rigid, or you can tell, like you said, they're going through these little checkpoints in their head where they're trying to get to certain positions versus, hey, we're just being an athlete, you know, see the ball, hit the ball, throw the ball wherever we need to go to, catch it, right? I talked about like web gyms before, so sometimes you don't have to really practice thinking about how to dive. You're just like, hey, I just saw this guy on TV dive. I'm gonna go try to do the same thing. And sometimes it can
Right?
just be that simple.
Absolutely.
Love it. So I guess I kind of want to shift gears here a little bit where, we were talking a little about some of the overcoaching, and I know this is all from well-meaning coaches who are trying to help kids, but sometimes it can corrupt things here or there, myself included, right? Like we've all done things that may or may not have been at the end of the day the best result, but that's the art and science of coaching, right? Um, but for me, I always, whenever I try to make any kind of mechanical adjustments or anything, it's to try to prevent injuries, right? And most of that's also tracking workload and things like that as well, because I help train guys remotely on an app. So I'm tracking, seeing what they're doing throughout all their training. And you also have a website called Safe Baseball, which I wanted to kind of touch on and open the floor for you too. But how have you seen baseball kind of change over the years from back when you were first coaching your sons to, I guess, now how it's kind of evolved and how we can kind of help keep baseball as safe as possible for these kids?
Well, I think now, there certainly is a lot more emphasis on training and stretching and the taking care of your body. I mean, people understand that more now than they did before.
Absolutely.
So there's no question that that's definitely helping prevent injuries. Um, and then concussions. Back when my oldest son was playing um, Pop Warner football, you just got your bell rung, get back in there. And
Hmm.
now people understand concussions are pretty serious. So my Safe Baseball course, it's an online course and it's designed for youth leagues to give to their coaches. It's really not so much for the player to be able to perform at a peak level. It's more to keep kids from being injured on the practice or game field. It's if you think about youth baseball, it's a sport where we give kids metal poles to swing around and rocks to throw at each other. And the only supervision is 2 or 3 moms or dads who have no training. And it's just insane, and with the amount of baseball that I've coached, I spent 7 years in high school and college coaching a recreational league. I coached 3 games a day, 5 days a week, and I practiced every day, 5 days a week. And then I coached my 4 kids. I mean, there's probably nobody out there walking around who's coached as much youth baseball as I have. I mean, I'd be really shocked if there was anybody who has. I've seen the ball come off the bat, off the glove, every possible way it could. And if I walk through a youth baseball complex, invariably I'm going to see dangerous situations that these coaches don't notice. And I'll always call a coach over and I'll say, hey, can you move that equipment over there out of play so a kid doesn't trip over it? Oh, geez, yeah, we hadn't thought about that. Can you move that chain drag over there so that somebody doesn't fall and scrape their face across the chain drag?
Oh yeah.
Just things that nobody notices, just even field implements. I saw one of my favorite kids I ever coached. Saw him dive for a foul ball, and the field had a cement curb, and he went face first into this curb and broke his 4 front teeth. And he'll have a lifelong problem with his teeth because of this. I mean, he's got implants, but this is just going to be a problem for the rest of his life. And that's the kind of thing that could be prevented if somebody looks out there and says, hey, you need to either put padding on this curb, or you need to make sure that this is completely designated as out of play, so that nobody's going to head over there in that direction chasing a foul ball. You need to make sure that something like this can't happen. And so that's what safe baseball is about. It's basically just showing coaches dangerous situations that their kids could be put in that they wouldn't notice otherwise. I mean, again, I could go through a lot of specific examples, but the bottom line is that when a coach takes this course, they're going to get to the field, and instead of thinking, who's going to be my starting pitcher, who's playing shortstop, they're thinking, how can a kid get hurt? Let me look around and make sure there's nothing out here that's going to get a kid hurt. And
Oh yeah.
that's
There's a
the
lot of things that are very preventative. I 100% agree with that. Not to uh jump in too much here, but I did have a similar experience, not as much as what that kid had when he hit a curb, but I made a uh really more of a just regular routine ground ball that hit a divot. Obviously, it's one of those things you can't really prevent if you're just looking at the field, but it hits the divot, pops up and hits me square in the mouth, and my tooth goes all the way to the back of my mouth and just kind of cuts my lip and everything. So, I can definitely relate to that guy whenever he had dental issues for baseball.
Yep.
There's,
Yep.
there's quite a few of those. And even, I've seen several guys, they're on the on deck circle or in between innings or right before a game, everybody has their bats out and they're just kind of swinging it around. And I even vividly remember one of my friends on a little league team, like he was just going through a swing, and right on his backswing, he hit one of our teammates square in the chest, like with the bat, just smacked really hard, and just honestly kind of knocked the wind out of him a little bit, almost similar to a football hit. But that ever since then, all the parents that were around, or even us as athletes, were like, okay, hey, like we're holding the bat halfway through, right? We're gonna just kind of stick it here, and then you're only doing full swings if you're in the cage, or if you're on the on deck circle with nobody around you. So little things like
Well,
that.
so here's
Yeah, go ahead.
here's a couple examples. I mean, you first of all, there's a reason Little League does not allow an on deck circle, and there's a reason that Little League has a rule that anybody who's touching a bat has to have a helmet on. That kid who got hit in the chest, thank God it wasn't his forehead. Thank God it wasn't his temple.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's a lot of I guess I sound like I'm propping up Little League here, but there's a lot of reasons that Little League has rules that they have, and one of them is no kid is allowed out of the dugout without a helmet on. And you think, well, what's the harm of running out of the dugout without a helmet on? When I was coaching my oldest son's majors team in Little League, we had a kid playing shortstop who ended up playing in AAA as a pitcher. And at the time, he was throwing mid 70s from the mound as a 12-year-old. And this particular game, he was playing shortstop, and we were doing infield, outfield. And just as he picked up a ball and he threw to first, and it was a wild throw, a kid from the other team came running out of the dugout without a helmet on, hit him right in the temple, and
Hmm.
dropped him unconscious right there on the field. If he had had a helmet on, it would have hurt, but he would have been fine. And
Yeah.
so, the point is, and I mean, I walk by a t-ball field, and I'll see that all of the kids, the little kids, are sitting out along the first baseline while there's the kid up to bat. And I will pull a parent over and I'll say, hey, can you get these kids back behind the dugout? Because if that boy let go of that bat, you've got a helicopter flying over towards all these kids' faces. And you can see their faces turn white, these parents. They say, we never thought of that. And they then grab the kids and make them move back behind the fence. So, again, it's just those are the types of things nobody anticipates, nobody foresees happening until it's too late. And so that's what my course, Safe Baseball, is designed to do, is to teach parents to say, hey, something dangerous could happen if we don't make sure these kids are in a safe position.
100%. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And sometimes people, like you mentioned, never really been around the game before, and they've never been aware of what all could possibly happen. But easily preventable is those guys just staying in the dugout. It's really easy, and especially at the T-ball level, right? Like guys are flailing balls, and who knows where it's going to be thrown, or they drop the bat, and like you said, it helicopters over because they're just mid swing, let go of it. There's so many
Yep.
possibilities that happen there. So yeah, I definitely do think that that awareness should be raised a lot. And there's going to be freak accidents, don't get me wrong, but if you can prevent as many of those as possible by just positioning guys correctly, or like you mentioned, field equipment, or even just inspecting the field, like rainouts or things like that, sometimes that might be the umpire's call, or sometimes it could be the coaches before the game starts. Again, depending on which league, they have different rules, right? But I think safety should be a number one priority for sure. Um, and,
Absolutely.
and not to get to the point where it's like, hey, like we're basically putting bubble wrap around these kids. That's a little extreme. They have pads everywhere for everything now. Like kids have the elbow guard, which I think is valuable, and then they have a shin one, but they have, you know, some literally everywhere. And I'm like, is that really necessary? I mean, if you had a bad experience, maybe, but you know, getting a little bit to where you almost put on an entire catcher's gear before you go into hit is a little excessive.
Right. And again, there are preventable injuries, and then there are the injuries that are not preventable.
Mhm.
You can't prevent a kid hit by pitch. You can't prevent a kid taking a bad hop into the mouth like you did. Those are the kinds of things that are going to happen in baseball. We're talking about preventable injuries where you've got somebody walking up into a swinging bat without seeing it coming, or somebody who's playing catch out in the outfield and another player throws one wild because they're too close and beans him in the head. Those are the injuries that are preventable that
Mhm.
coaches need to be able to pay attention to and monitor.
100%. And I think just kind of me thinking out loud, but a lot of things that I think is also preventable, and where a lot of kids do get some of these injuries, is really tremendous high spikes in workload or throwing volume. Pitchers, for example, right? Like they go from, in the little league, maybe as they get older, you have guys that get a little bit more serious about their preparation before a season. But sometimes kids just go right out there. They haven't really thrown or practiced maybe 1 or 2 weeks before a tryout because they're playing other sports and they're doing other things, which I totally understand. um, and they need to do that. But at the same time, like if you're going out there, their first practice or their first game, they're throwing, you know, 3, 4 innings, and they haven't even thrown a single bullpen yet. That's where you're putting kids at risk for injury because they haven't worked up to a certain amount of volume of throwing, right? And the pitch count rule is great, but even then, like you got to look at really more chronic workload of what they've been doing over a long period of time as well to be able to truly evaluate if the pitch count is, uh, a good place to be or not. Because sometimes if it's their first outing, they got to probably cut that back to, 20, 30 pitches or so. Right. And then as they go out through the next outing, then they can start adding a few more things up to that maximum pitch count uh, rule, roughly. Right.
Yep.
Do you mention that at all in the safe baseball course, or is that something that
No, yeah, no question about it. I mean, not only adhering to the pitch count rules, but listening to it, listen to what the kid is saying. I mean, in other words, if a kid ever says elbow hurts, it's shutdown time.
hmm,
You don't tell a kid to push through something like elbow pain, and a lot of coaches don't understand that. And unfortunately for me, I even had a situation with my oldest son when he was um, a freshman in high school. His elbow hurt, and I just kind of thought, okay, it's probably just arm soreness, and so we just kept going. We kept going, kept going. It turned out that he had separated his growth plate, and
hmm.
he had to miss. He had to get shut down for an entire half of the season, and it just, it really had a severe consequence on his career. And if I had known at the time that you take elbow pain seriously and you immediately go get it looked at, it might have been a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in youth baseball, you have to be very careful of not injuring growth plates further because again, it could affect them later on in life too. Um, even outside of baseball. So when it comes to growth plates, I 100% recommend, hey, you shut it down. Um, rest for that is probably your best thing. Now, if it's like tendonitis or things like that, or as kids get older, just resting in general, like being a couch potato, I guess is where I'm kind of getting at. It's probably not the best alternative motive. Like you need to go to physical therapy or you need to do some type of exercise routine to help strengthen that area to prevent even further injury there. But, you know, growth plates are a totally different animal that do require probably just a complete shutdown for sure. And
Yeah,
that if in it when in doubt, I say just go get an x-ray somewhere and get it checked out. And if you don't see anything or the doctor doesn't see anything that, might be rearing a red flag, then maybe you just kind of, again, go back to the workload piece or ask the kid better questions like, hey, is this muscle? Are you feeling it? Can they pinpoint it somewhere? And then that's where you might refer out to a specialist too. If it gets really, really minute and over a long period of time. Like if it comes and goes or it goes away when they throw, that's probably just general soreness. But if they are still trying to throw and they throw through pain, that's something that you definitely do not want to endorse whatsoever.
that's right.
Well, yeah, Brian, what other things do you have your hand in? I know you got a lot of them, and I probably haven't touched on all of them here, but what are some things that you want the listeners to know more about and what you're getting into now?
Well, I think I could really help coaches with the most, probably all the way up to high school and maybe even into some high school coaches is my book, Winning Secrets, which is really kind of a culmination or sort of a memoir of all the coaching that I've done in youth baseball. And so in my book, Winning Secrets, we cover everything from choosing a team to how to talk to parents, and then how to run practices and offensive and defensive strategies, base running tips, team buy-in and effort. All of that's covered in the book, and it's really, I think, the definitive how-to guide to coach youth baseball. And that's something that anybody who's coaching a youth team starting this season, and maybe they're in minors or majors, and they'd love to have an advantage. They'd love to get to the championship game. This book will be invaluable to them.
I love it. And it sounds like I'm definitely going to check that book out, but it sounds like a lot of those winning secrets are boiling down to a lot of communication. Am I Am I wrong with that, or is that, I'm sure there's probably other ones in there, but like, you said how to talk to parents or team buy-in, like that's all how the coach communicates, right?
Without question. I mean, when we started the season, the first thing we talked to our team about was the history of the team they're involved in. This team's won 3 championships in the last 4 seasons. You're part of that now. And we talked to them about the importance of being a great teammate. And one of the things that I always told my kids and I always talk to my kids about, they said, you probably heard the expression pick me up. Where do you think that came from?
Hmm.
And we would say to them, I don't know for sure where it came from, but my guess is it came from the battlefield. You're out on the battlefield and one of your fellow soldiers gets hit and he's down and he says, pick me up.
Mm.
And you have a choice.
Literally. Yeah.
You can run away, or you can, at your peril, you can grab that fellow soldier, put him on your shoulders, and you can try to get him into safety. And so what does that have to do with baseball? Well, kid comes back after striking out looking and he let the team down. He comes back in and somebody needs to pick him up. Somebody needs to help that kid get his mental attitude back to help the team. And we talk about, there's, I would always give an example of a shortstop turn a double play, and shortstop picks up the ball, makes the perfect toss over to the second baseman. Second baseman comes to hit the bag and catch the ball at the same time, drops the ball, runner's safe. Shortstop's got 2 choices. He can throw his arms up in the air and he can say something like, you got to make that catch.
Mm.
Well, that's a bad teammate. A good teammate, shortstop's going to say, hey, my fault, that was a bad throw, even though it wasn't a bad throw. So, and I would tell my kids, I would do that if somebody dropped the ball that I threw to them, not because I necessarily wanted to be such a nice guy, but it's because I wanted to win. And I knew if I made that guy feel bad about catching that ball or dropping that ball, he doesn't want the play coming to him the next time. He's out there nervous. But if
Mm.
instead, if he knows I got him picked up and I said, hey, that's my fault, you're good. Now he's out there with a ton of confidence. And how is he looking at me as a teammate? He's looking at me as a teammate like that's a guy I want to sacrifice anything for. So, that's all part of being a teammate and not being a me guy.
Oh, I
And
love that.
we would always talk to our players about the work we were putting in, how hard we were working as a team, and explain to them nobody else has worked as hard as we have. And before the games, we'd pull the kids aside while the other team was taking infield and outfield and saying, look, these guys haven't worked as hard as we have. They aren't as ready as we are. So we have no reason to be nervous. That doesn't mean we're going to necessarily win this game, but we're as prepared as we can possibly be. And that's a great feeling.
Absolutely. No, I love that. All really great things that you said there. And I think, you know, really kind of shifting more back towards being the team guy versus the I guy as guys are getting older. There is a little bit more selfishness involved there where guys are trying to get contracts or, they're trying to get the next NIL deal or, shift over to the starting position, right? But at the end of the day, I love baseball because you can still be so um, focused on yourself, but also still help out the team, right? And to your example there, it's like, okay, hey, I made an error, or hey, I'm going 0 for 3 at the plate. I can still control, hey, I'm going to do the best I can to be the best defensive player, or vice versa. You make an error. Hey, I'm going to make up for that for you guys as a team for me to get on base, get a hit, whatever it might be to help the team as a whole, but you're also helping out yourself in the long run too, which is great, I think. It's just the beauty
Well,
of
I can tell you my oldest son got drafted by the Rays and was playing his first year of minor league ball, and the outfield coordinator came up to him and said, "Hey, look, I have coached for a lot of years, and I've never coached a kid who plays as hard as you do. And these other guys out here are going to give you a hard time about it. Don't listen to them. You just keep doing what you've been doing."
Hmm.
coaches coaches notice that stuff. And so, yeah, you're trying to get your NIL deal, you're trying to get your scholarship, but a good coach is going to see a team player ahead of anything else, ahead of numbers, ahead of statistics. A good coach is going to see a guy who's given 100% effort for his team versus maybe pulling up a little bit just to make sure that, he looks good. And so I think a lot of guys don't understand that the best coaches, when they're watching you, they're watching you from the time you get you cross the white lines 45 minutes before the game starts. And they're watching how you comport yourself. They're watching how hard you play. They're watching how you interact with your teammates. Do your teammates want to be around you, or are you a lone wolf out there because your teammates don't like you? All that stuff goes into the calculus of whether you're going to get that scholarship, whether you're going to get that NIL deal.
Oh, 100%. And you may not have a statistic for that, like you mentioned, right? But coaches notice, and I'm sure even, with the Rays, the front office staff, they can see those things that are kind of intangibles and take those into account for guys too. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have anyone that's a team guy, you're not going to win very many games. You might win for a little while, but towards the end, whenever it gets championship time, it may not amount to much if you have the guys who have the best stats, but then go in and then they choke or they can't pick each other up because they're too focused on their own stats or their own, selfish goals, which again, they're not nothing wrong with that, but you also have to take into account to help the guy alongside you and pick him up and be the best teammate you can possibly be. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome, Brian. Well, that's all I really had for you. Was there any last closing remarks or maybe even kind of plug some socials or ways on how some of the listeners can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, coaches can order the book Winning Secrets through my website, booksbygata.com. I've also written 4 youth sports children's novels. So if anybody out there's listening, they've got sports fan kids that are in grade school would like to pick up one of the sports novels, those are also on the book, or you can get all these books on Amazon as well. So, like I said, the Winning Secrets, really, to me, if you're coaching, especially youth baseball, and you want to have some advantages and you want to know some things that other coaches aren't going to know, and have the ability to give your team that sort of special edge, I would really recommend picking up Winning Secrets.
Love it. And it helps guys do what they can to stay in the zone, right? Awesome.
That's right.
Love it. Love it. Well, Brian, appreciate you taking the time to come on. I really enjoyed it. And I know a lot of the listeners will too. And for those of you listening, appreciate you tuning in and stay in the zone.